Hello, my lovelies. Hello, lovelies. I have no clue what I am saying, but sorry I haven't been posting, but my other computer that I used to record on died. The screen wouldn't light up anymore, and now I have a new and better computer. And this would have been out probably before this would be out. But I didn't hit the record button, so I read all of it and didn't. So this is technically my third time actually reading this chapter. Doesn't mean it would be any better. But without further ado, we will be reading Seen Not Heard by LitaCakes, read to you by ADHD_God, Chapter 3. Have some faith in the silence. This is a wholesome chapter! And yes, it is wholesome. I should know. I've read this too many times. Okay. Izuku was out on patrol. Crouching in the darkness of the corner of the roof where he could easily duck away into the alley, if necessary, or back into the shadows where nobody could see him. He had been out since around 9, and it was going on 11. No criminal activity. Maybe the criminals and villains take weekdays off. Izuku doubted that. But it would be the only reason to explain why it was so dead on the streets on a random Thursday evening. Sitting down sit. Izuku took a granola bar from one of his many pockets and broke off a piece. He's learned years ago how to eat without taking off his mask. It wasn't ideal, but he shoved his fingers up under it, but it worked enough with non-messy foods. He rarely ate anything in public that might be too messy or hard to shove under his mask. He wore a thin neck sleeve that Inko had bought him not long before his initial injury. Not long after the initial injury, it covered up his neck and his chin, and kept the lower half of his scar hidden. The upper tips of Hisashi's fingers didn't peek over the mask. Thankfully, the pinky and ring finger covered half of his mouth, while the rest of the scar was across his cheek. When he was done with his granola bar, he traced his fingers around the scar. The shape was burned literally into his mind. For some reason, tracing the scar calmed him down. It distracted him from his thoughts from the present. Normally, he'd never allow himself to get distracted while on patrol, but today was quiet enough, quiet evening, so he could relax. He could afford to relax, or so he thought. Please back off from the ledge. Please step back from the ledge. A voice. The voice was deep and raspy. It sounded worried. Izuku blinked back into reality. He was just sitting on the roof edge in pretzel, with one hand still under his mask. He removed his hand quickly and realized somebody was behind him. He hadn't heard them approach. That was not good. That was not a good sign. How had somebody snuck up behind him? He rolled backwards and popped under the bowels of his feet in a defensive stance. He found, and what he may have found made his heart almost stop in his chest. Eraserhead was standing across from him on the roof. He had one hand up in a pacing manner, and the other on his capture weapon and his capture scarf. Why was he here? Why wasn't This wasn't Eraserhead's usual turf. Izuku made sure not to patrol where he wouldn't accidentally get caught by the underground hero. Hell, he tried to keep a strong line between his analyzation self while his vigilante self. Izuku swallowed a lump in his throat, trying to figure out what he could do, and to get out without Eraser pulling too many puzzle pieces together. Are you okay? Eraserhead asked. Izuku tilted his head. He didn't think. Oh, wait, did he think? Oh, Eraser thought he was gonna jump. Maybe Eraserhead thought he was gonna jump. Well, maybe Izuku from a couple of years ago might have considered it, but not Izuku today would never even daydream about that kind of thing. He had too many. He had too much to do. He had too many people to protect now. Now, Izuku finally nodded in response to Eraser's question. How can? How can? Can I ask you what you're doing up here? He knew the pretext of this foreseeing if Izuku needed help, but he wasn't up here for the reason Eraserhead thought he was up here for. So he shook his head and turned on his heels. Now he knew Eraserhead was a pro hero, but he was quick and light on his feet. Izuku was quick and light on his feet. Years of running, hiding, and professional training had kept him fast and limber. He had the scars to prove it now. How many times he's fallen off the very rooftops before he has gotten proficient at running them. Hey, wait, don't. Izuku bolted across the rooftops, reaching on into his pockets and pulled out a familiar disc. Tapping twice, it extended into a bat. He used it to grab onto the wires like a zip line. It gave him some distance between on Eraserhead. Thankfully, it was dark enough where he didn't need to worry about the hero seeing the kanji scrawled across his bat in spray paint. It only took 10 or 15 minutes to lose Eraserhead on the roofs, and then back down to the alleyways. But that was far too long. He knew he had to be faster if he wanted to stay out of the underground hero's sight next time. Next time, Eraserhead wouldn't think he was some guy about to jump off a roof. Next time, he'd realize exactly who Izuku was. There was a thin line lies there. The problem. There lies the problem. If Eraserhead found out that Koishi was a vigilante, then he could kiss his analyzation career and his main source of income goodbye. Izuku decided he would ask Mei to repaint his bat just to be safe. Shota sighed. Shota sighed deeply. Shota sighed deeply and walked back to the police station, rubbing one hand down his face in annoyance. Something didn't sit right with him, with the whole scenario. What was that guy doing on the roof? Why was he just carelessly sitting on the ledge? Casually sitting on the ledge, like debating the whole life, the world. But when Shota tried to interrupt, the guy was acting like he was bringing up for a fight. He didn't speak. He only answered in a nod or a shake of the head. Then, sprawled across the roofs. That was probably the worst part. Shota realized that guy was trained, and trained well. He was gone in minutes, and Shota hadn't been able to keep up. Eraserhead was a hero never lost when it came to battles of running and jumping on roofs. He had never met a match in his life, but this short, somehow faster and more agile along their concrete playground with Sketchy and his son. Sakashi leaned closer into the counter between them, one eyebrow arched, giving a genuine curiosity. I don't know, Suka. I just saw this guy on the rooftops. At first, I thought he was a jumper, and then I lost him. He ran across the roofs. He even pulled out a baseball bat from where I have no idea, and zipped across and used it like a zip line across the power lines. You, the great eraserhead, lost a target. That doesn't sound like you. Wait, was this guy in all black with a face mask? A baseball bat that was green and silver? Yeah, I think. It was dark. I couldn't see the bat too well. How do you know? Shutta pushed past the little door to the back of the patients to Sakashi's could lead them to his office. There's a suspicion he's a new vigilante. You're the first person to actually see the guy. What does that mean? Well, the guy is eerily stealthy, which I mean like so much more than you. He never leaves the shadows when fighting. No one ever hears or sees him going. Not even the civilians he saved to see him. The most we've gotten is his details of black clothing and his baseball bat, though one report said it had kanji on it. Sakashi ruffled through the papers on his and pulled out a notepad. He flipped through it, likely looking for the interview notes he was reflecting on a moment ago. Sorry about that. Oh, yeah, it read Koishi. So the civilian was fiddling. The guy was absolutely, says the filing. Oh, said it was fitting. The guy was absolutely soundless. The mugger who had come after him didn't even have a chance to react before he was tied up with a bat at his shoulders. The citizen only caught the kanji because of the street light nearby. Kaishi, are you sure? Well, as sure as the witness statement is. Why? Do you remember my quirk analyzation friend? Of course, that guy has given us many leads in the years before now. His moniker is Kaishi. It's the only name he's been giving me willing to give me, and I never understood why. Sakashi dripped down his slowly Takashi Sakashi slowly dropped his notepad, and one hand came to his lips though. Shota sorry. Shota lowered himself into his chair across from Suka's desk, trying to figure out if this was really the same guy. There were conclusions that made sense. After all, somebody who had an analyzation quirk as fast and as detailed as Koishi's would make an amazing fighter and invade the easily elevate in battle. He knew how to counter all the manners of quirks without much effort. He would also explain why. It would also explain why the guy had never given Shota that name in the first place. Given that name in the first place. If he really was a vigilante who attacked soundlessly, it makes sense, Suki finally said. Shota hummed in agreement. So, you know what this means, right? Shota sighed. Yeah, we gotta bring him in. I can't even believe to imagine what this quirk is by judging it. It's an analyzation. These analyzation winks of his, they're one and the same person. Most likely an IQ quirk. That's good. It means he won't get into any serious criminal charges. for being a vigilante. Maybe being a vigilante. Maybe he just get community service or patrol instead of jail time. Shota still didn't like the idea. He wanted to reach out to Koichi, his analyst, before making a decision to bring on the suspicious vigilante into their police. Izuku was panting by the time he made it back to his apartment. He hadn't stopped running around in circles until he was sure he lost Eraserhead. Leaning over his knees, he caught his breath in the shadow of the fire escape. He never went through the front door when he came back from patrols. He always used the side window instead. He climbed through the window and his phone buzzed in his pocket. Well, shit, who could that be? He only had two names in his phone, May and Eraserhead. Izuku slumped and rolled onto his back, and the realization hit him that Eraserhead might have put the damn puzzle pieces together. Alright, already. He checked his phone quickly before he could even get off the ground. Eraserhead. Are you busy, Kay? Koi? Shit. Izuku scrambled in front from his spot from the ground and grabbed his laptop. Eraser likely saw that he read the message, so he had to reply momentarily, but first he launched a few programs on his laptop and let them run so he could track Eraserhead's phone, and also pull up a few cameras from the Minifura police 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 station. Come on. There. Izuku pulled up Detective Sakashi's office. Eraserhead and Takashi were sitting. We're sitting and chatting. Eraserhead had his phone in his hand. Double shit. They were trying to smoke him out. Of course, the detective already had leads on the new vigilante in the city, but they shouldn't. But they shouldn't know it as Koyoshi, right? Unless one of the people he had rescued had seen his bat and told him about the kanji. That would have led to Takashi's lead. Takashi's lead. And of course, Eraserhead knew that what that name meant. Triple shit. Kakashi. Koishi. Koishi. Hey, Eraser, what's up? I'm just working on some programming and data entry. What do you need? The reply was almost immediate. Izuku watched Eraser type in real time on the cameras. Eraserhead. I was hoping we could finally meet. I have a complex case I want your help with. I don't know. I know you work solo, but there's a detective on this case that wants you to meet. Security risks and all that. He trusts me, but Koichi. But he doesn't trust me. Eraserhead. Yeah, you think you can spare a few minutes? I mean, it's a big step from what, but we've been working together for years now. But do you trust me? Izuku wanted to say yes. Holy hell, did he want to say yes? He trusted Eraserhead. Izuku really trusted him, but now he knew if he went forward with this, he'd get caught, and then again, saying no would also make things complicated. Izuku had to make a decision here. A crossroads with a left and right fork stood before him. He could trust Eraserhead and turn himself in, or he could opt to say no and continue his vigilante work in the first case. In the first case, Izuku would likely be sent to jail and tormented because of the court as a quirkless run that he truly has. In the second, Izuku would lose Eraser's trust and his income. Maybe he'd be able to stay out of jail for at least a little while. In the end, Izuku knew he couldn't run forever. The police were already onto him, and Eraserhead and Sakashi put their heads together. But there was no way Izuku was getting out of this scot-free. Izuku sighed and put his head in his hands. There was no easy way out of this. He was technically still in middle school, so if he got caught, they'd probably send him back to Inko, at least, or jail, at the very worst. But he packed up. But if he packed up and found a place nondescript to live, maybe like a warehouse or something, he could hide from them. He could continue to run and protect the people he wanted to. Closing his laptop with a loud clap, Izuku flipped over his text with May. Flipped to his text with May. Chat with May. He hit the video chat option, waiting for her to pick up. He knew she would still be awake, even if it was almost midnight. She never slept before 2 a.m. on weekdays, and before 4 a.m. on weekends. May picked up after the second ring. Izu, what's up? Are you okay? Did something happen on patrol? At some point, he had given up denying that he was a vigilante to May. She was too smart for her own good, and Izuku didn't like lying to her. He was already lying to her about his quirk, and felt remorseful, and felt not fun, so he tried not to lie to her about anything else. Izuku set his phone on its stand and signed to her. May, I ran into Eraserhead on patrol. Now he's texting Koishi, uh, she asking me to come and work in a case in person. I know it's a lie. I checked the cameras, and they're in the police station. He's working with Takashi. That I know that detective. He's on my vigilante case. With those two putting their heads together, I think they know Koishi, the informant, and Koishi, the vigilante, are one and the same. I don't know what to do, May. I can if I accept and go in, they'll throw me in jail. But if I don't, I'll lose Eraser's trust and my only income. Whoa, slow down, Izuku. I know, I know, I know the gist of that. Well, I guess it depends. I mean, I guess if because you go in as Koichi the informant doesn't mean you'll get caught outright as a villain. What are the quirks they're working with? Izuku thought over it and pulled over an older notebook from about a year ago. When he heard something though something through, he the gravity that told him the grapevine that the police were starting to track his vigilante movements. Eraserhead. Quirk Eraser. He can temporarily turn off somebody's quirk. And if it's a mutant, when he looks directly at them to activate he cannot affect mutant type quirks. Okay, well, that's not a concern for you. Izuku was not Sure, it was because May believed he had an IQ quirk, or which was a mutant quirk type quirk, or because she knew all the truth of he was quirkless. That was a can of worms he was not planning on asking or opening. Detective Takashi Tsukoishi or some stuff. I don't remember how to say his name. Sorry if I'm butchering names, but back to this thing. Also known as True Man, quirk lie detector. He can tell if a person is lying when they speak. What are you worried about? Then why? Then what? Then what are you worried about? What? Izuku. May shifted her phone to be closer to her face. You're mute. He can't lie detect sign language, can he? Izuku leaned back in shock to his core. May was right. He was panicking over practically nothing. Okay, that was bullshit. He had plenty to panic about over. He had plenty to panic over. But being caught wasn't one of them. Well, now he was had a new issue. If he went out as Koichi the informant, they'd realize he's a kid. And they'd probably prove interesting. He could lie his way out, sure. That would probably put him in serious watch list. Izuku, hey, back to Izu. Hey, back to Earth, Star Child. May called Izuku called Izuku shook his head. Sorry, he signed, offering a fresh, flustered grunt as well. Hey, it's okay. Do you want me to go with you? I could translate if you needed to sign. Izuku shook his head. I don't want to give that away. I don't want to give away that I can sign yet. I will just use a type to text to speech program and explain my medical bullshit, I guess. Are they going to buy it? Izuku blinked. What? You thought I didn't know that you didn't have it's not a lung disorder. You're hiding behind that mask. Come on, Izuku. We both know that's bullshit. But I don't care. You're my best friend, and you're my also my best client. Don't sweat the small stuff. I don't care if you have a quirk or you're actually sickly. I don't care if you have a quirk or if you're actually sickly. You're just Izuku to me, okay? Izuku stared at the screen with confused eyes. No one had ever told him that his quirk didn't matter, that he was just Izuku. That was enough. Just like that. A smile simply cracked on his face. It was a genuine one, for probably the first time in years. He had wiped a few tears from his face as he nodded and sighed a simple thank you to the best of his abilities. No, thank you. No, thanking me for having common decency. Just work your magic and get those jokers off your ass so I can make more gear for you. I'm almost done with the latest modification on one of your guns. I also need to upgrade your bat, too. It's been a year since your last model. And I have some new materials I want to try out. I'll deliver both next week, okay? Sounds good, May. Thank you. Sounds good. Thank you, May. She waved and hung up. Izuku took a deep breath. Took a deep and free breath. He could do this. May knew exactly how to help him. Grabbing his phone off the stand, Izuku reopened his conversation with Eraserhead on the laptop. The two were still sitting in the detective's office. Eraser was staring at his phone on his lap, frustrated and concerned. Takashi was working on some forms of some kind. Forms of some kind. Koichi, I trust you. Where and when? Eraserhead, are you free tonight? The Mifukyu police Station. Koishi. I'll be there in 45. I'm not close by right now. It was a ploy to make him think he wasn't nearby. Sadly, his apartment was only a 10-minute walk from here to the police station, so he had some time to change out of his vigilante gear and put on some street clothes. He also opted to take a shower and put on a little makeup to cover up a few freckles that showed up on his forehead. Showed up around his mask and forehead. He picked out some black jeans and a white t-shirt and a black hoodie over top and swapped out his vigilante mask for his everyday mask, which was well worn out and a light green. The last thing he grabbed was his laptop bag with his laptop after he closed all the programs he had running, and a notepad and pen. After arriving exactly 45 minutes after he texted saying he'd be there, he was pretty sure that nobody was expecting a 14-year-old kid to walk into a police station, especially not wearing heavy clothing and face covering, and a face mask. However, it played into his persona anyway. He was solo working informant, an analyst, so he could play up the angle along with the medical bullshit that Inko had installed in him 3 years ago. Can I help you, boy? Izuku resisted the urge to wince. He hated that word. It sounded so much like Hasashi. Izuku tugged out a piece of paper before he left the house. My name is Koishi. I am a quirk analyst working under Eraserhead. He requested a meeting at this station this evening. The police officer gave a curious look and frowned. Izuku shot Izuku a glare and then muttered a soft "wait here" before heading back, likely to show Eraserhead the note. Or maybe the detective? He waited. As he waited, Izuku switched the stories around in his head. Maybe he could spin things to make things a little more believable regarding his mutism. He added a dash of reality, so they wouldn't be able to tell if it was fake. So maybe he would do that. This way, the officer returned and unleashed from the behind the little door, certain of the corner. Izuku followed him into the back of the office, to the back of the very office he'd been watching on the cameras about not even an hour ago. The police officer left him standing at the door. Izuku knocked. Come on in. Come in. An unfamiliar voice called. It wasn't Eraserhead, so he assumed it was Takashi. Takashi's. Izuku opened the door to face his doom. Bright green eyes flickered across every surface, including one tired-looking underground hero. One equally exhausted detective. Eraserhead was still wearing his capture scarf. He didn't take it off during off-duty time? All the time. Did he wear it all the time? His goggles were around his neck, but his feet were propped up on Takashi's desk, casually. He was relaxed, but looked like he was about to pass out. Takashi didn't look any better. Actually, while he was buried under a pile of papers at the desk, and Izuku could barely make out the man behind his computer. and adjust piles of paperwork. It didn't look as bad from an upright angle from the camera. Izuku flipped his eyes from flipped to the camera for a moment, then back to Eraserhead. No one has spoken a word. Were they waiting for him to speak? Izuku Infinity took that to sit down and set his laptop bag down next to the desk and flopped into a chair next to Eraser. Koichi? The underground hero asked tentatively. Oh, did the police officer not tell them Izuku was a teenager? Probably thought it was funny. They probably thought it was funny and didn't. So, Izuku nodded and took out his notepad and paper. Takashi finally unburied himself from the desk in only a blink of confusion when he spotted a teen next to his co-worker. Izuku scrawled a note on the first page and offered the message to Eraser, who read it aloud for Takashi. Yes, I am Koichi. I apologize for the unorthodox way of communication. I am mute. I have a lung condition which makes it breathing difficult without a filtration mask. When I was young, I had a very bad episode that damaged my vocal cords, and that's how I chose analyzation work. My analyzation moniker. What's the case you need need me to help with? Making sure. Me too. Well, we need some analyzations done on someone. There's an issue. There's so little data on this person. We're not sure where to begin. It's a rising vigilante with no name. Hell, no one's ever seen his face or knows much more. Besides, he uses a baseball bat to capture villains and criminals. There's what these kids call cryptic signs these days of him floating around online. But it's not really helpful. Izuku watched the detective as he described the very persons sitting in the room with them. They wanted him to analyze himself. That wasn't that just hilarious? Obviously, it was a ploy to get him to crack, but he didn't admit to his own persona. He didn't admit it's its own persona. But Izuku wasn't broken that easily. He had spent his whole life being broken, over and over, by the people who brought him up in this world. Every friend or loved one he had ever left him for the simple circumstances of his quirk status. That could break someone, but this would be fun. Eraserhead handed him a file, watching him intensely for a sign of a reaction. Izuku didn't let them see anything. They could use it all against him. He didn't let them see anything that they could use against him. All of these years of hiding from Hasashi, hiding was easy, even in plain sight. Be seen, not heard. Better yet, be neither. The man's words drew a sneer on his face. He could one he couldn't stop from appearing. Thankfully, it didn't show from behind his face mask. Izuku flipped open one of the files to read the little information they had on his vigilante persona. It was, of course, a description of his clothing and a blurry picture from a traffic camera and details of his bat, that's where Izuku stopped. The file listed the kanji and the meaning. Was this a secondary test? How was it best to respond to it? Twisting his pen in his fingers, Izuku decided to read over the rest of the file before reacting. He only found a little more. He found a little more than a list of criminals. His vigilante persona was responsible for bringing in. There was a few villains listed here as well. Once he was done, the file was snapped shut. He retrieved his notebook and wrote out notes which he handed to Eraser. I am curious why my analyzation moniker happens to be scrawled across this villain's baseball bat. I wonder if there's a particular reason for it. Maybe he is trying to send a message? A silent justice that comes in the night? Of course that was absolutely nothing to do with it. Izuku just wanted to trip them up a little. Confuse them, push them in the wrong direction. Possibly. Eraser muddled. Okay, we're going to address the elephant in the room. Takashi finally spoke up again. Izuku tilted his head, silently asking why. What he meant? Oh, come on. You're so clearly a teenager. You can't be more than 15. How does a kid become one of the best quirk analyzers in the city has ever seen? You've been supposedly working with Eraserhead for years. When did you even start? You can't honestly think we believe you. Believe you're the real Koichi. Do your parents even know you're out here this late on a school night? Izuku sighed and looked at his laptop. He was certainly not answering the question about his parents, but if they wanted him to show off, he could handle that. Setting his laptop on the remaining clean spot, he pulled out a few programs and stand behind him. Pick a hero or a villain. Anyone you want. Preferably somebody I haven't analyzed already before. He winced, and Eraserhead chewed his limp lip, and Sakashi sighed in expiration. Fine. Sakashi barked. Ectoplasm. Eraserhead finished. Full report. Izuku nodded. Eraserhead was usually going with what he wanted, strengths, weaknesses, but a full report meant he wanted everything Izuku could give him. Izuku turned back to his laptop and sat into his chair before cracking his knuckle a bit more. Before crackling his knuckles, this would be fun. He has never shown off to anybody but May before. 3 hours later. Takashi was eating his words. Izuku showed them from beginning to end how he analyzed people's quirks. It was a lengthy progress. Lengthy progress that included full public records, employee, and education history, all news and media appearances, and mentions and appearances and mentions reviews. A combat and work review. There were, of course, assumptions and conclusions drawn through Izuku's own intelligence, but those were in separate sections on the report. Ectoplasm was an easy target for this, since he didn't have a big file on him. Most of the people Izuku analyzed for Eraserhead, 3 hours was a short work session. When he was done, Izuku turned his laptop and tapped Eraserhead's shoulder. The man was half dozed off in his chair. Sakashi was sitting in his chair with his head in his hands. He'd been in that position for the last hour. All done? All done? Eraserhead asked. Izuku nodded and motioned to the file. He knew that since Eraserhead worked at UA like ectoplasm, most of what in the file would be common knowledge to the underground hero, but managed to find a few bits that might even be a surprise to him. That's good. Good work, kiddo. I think you've proved your point to your identity. I'm pretty sure he's proved his point 2 hours ago, Eraser. Takashi groaned. Hey, you're the one who wanted verification. Eraser. You can't tell me that you believe this kid was Koichi when he walked in the door. Honestly, I had no perceived notion of who or what Koichi was, so it wasn't that hard to accept that he was some genius kid. Izuku didn't bother interrupting their conversation. He packed his laptop away and notepad and grabbed his file on his vigilante persona and put it into his bag. They likely had other copies, as well as digital copies. Izuku couldn't get rid of it without raising suspicion, while the two men harshly out their debate over Izuku's age. He ducked out of the office and grabbed the coffee from the coffee machine. Off the side. A couple of police officers looked at him weirdly, but didn't stop him. He mixed some sugar in it and left the station before Eraserhead or Takashi even noticed he was gone. Izuku was good at going unnoticed, and it came in handy. Thank you for listening.